As of 2010, we passed H.R. 6080, the 2010 Emergency Border Security Supplemental Appropriation, which provided $600 million to strengthen border security and help reduce violence along the southwest border. This funding allowed for the hiring of 1,000 new Border Patrol agents to be assigned to the southwest border. In order for us to provide our legislative oversight and to ensure that we appropriately are allocating resources to the areas that need the most assistance, I've asked CBP where this new Border Patrol agents will be assigned. And I'm going to ask if they can put the chart up on the screen. Members, I'm going to give you a handout in a few minutes also that shows what's up there in the screen. Tucson, which is already the largest BPP sector with 3,361 agents in FY10, will receive 500 new agents. El Paso, which is the second largest sector with 2,718 agents, will receive 187 new agents, which is the second largest allocation. The San Diego area, which is the third largest sector with 2,588 agents, and the Rio Grande Valley, which is the fourth largest with 2,418, each will receive 150 new agents. The remaining sectors, Laredo, Del Rio, Central, Yuma, Marfa, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th sector, respectively, in the number of agents assigned, and none of these sectors will receive any of the new Border Patrols out of this plus-up. I've also asked for statistics regarding the number of agents already assigned to each sector prior to this plus-up, and the number of apprehensions that each sector made in the fiscal year 2010. Mr. Fisher, you and I have talked, and when I asked you for the factors to be used, you used apprehensions. Then later, when I asked you to explain why those numbers were allocated, you came up with some other vague threat, risk, other, without being able to define those. A few minutes ago, Mr. Borowski, you also said that CBP uses apprehensions to measure how effective they've been with the enforcement of border apprehensions. In fact, Mr. Fisher, when I asked you to provide me the factors, the only thing you gave me, members, was apprehensions, and you all should get a copy of the handouts of this one to see what each sector gets in apprehensions. CBP provided the statistics for the creation of the graph that I've displayed overhead. And I put this graph, which lists all the Border Patrol sectors along the southwest border, shows a ratio as to how many undocumented persons were apprehended per Border Patrol agents assigned to sectors in fiscal year 2010. I've listed the sectors in order, starting with the highest apprehension rates to the lowest. For example, Tucson, members, is the one at the left side, which is the apprehensions is the one in the blue. The red is the additional numbers that each sector is supposed to be getting. Those are done by tenths. And then the lowest is El Paso, which has the lowest amount of apprehension, but gets the second largest number of officers. So I've listed the sectors in order, starting with the highest apprehension rates to the lowest. For example, Tucson, as I mentioned, has a ratio of 62.3 apprehensions per Border Patrol agent. El Paso has the lowest ratio of 4.4 apprehensions for Border Patrol in FY10. At Central, which has the second largest or second highest apprehension rate at 26.8, yet this sector is not receiving any new Border Patrol agents. Chief Fisher, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. I don't think these decisions of these allocations are political, but to an outside observer, it might sure look that way. It will look as the amount allocated for Central was moved to El Paso. In fact, if you look at the red, I think that red should be where the second largest is, and maybe you made a mistake on that, but it looks like that allocation is wrong. I don't know, I don't see Ms. Loretta here, but I'm sure that her or Dan Loudgren from California and any other folks would question as to why the second highest apprehension rate per agent is not receiving any agents, while the lowest sector that has the lowest rate of apprehension is getting the second allocation of new agents of 187 under this supplemental. Can you explain that?
Congressman, I would be happy to. As a matter of fact, I want to make sure that I'm clear, because I am not explaining myself clearly as it relates to staffing. It is true that apprehensions are a factor that we take into consideration for a number of things, not the least of which is staffing levels. It is inaccurate to suggest it's the only thing that we take into consideration. For instance, the supplemental that you had mentioned, of those 1,000 Border Patrol agents for the supplemental, 500 of those agents will be going to the Tucson area as permanent full-time equivalents. The other 500 will be dispersed along 4 corridors along the southwest border to make up what's called the mobile response teams. Now, although they are assigned to a sector, because we have to assign them to those areas, the corridor concept in those 4 locations are consistent with which we have identified areas along the southwest border to be able to manage risk, both in terms of the threat, which is the intent and capability of all those seeking to do harm into this country, and to identify threat along the southern border in particular in terms of volume of activity. We also take into consideration vulnerability, which makes up that threat picture. So it is true that...
Mr. Fisher, I'm sorry, don't mean to interrupt.
Please.
Apprehension number 1, give me in a concrete manner what the second factor is.
The second factor would be effectiveness, which by our definition is the proportion of apprehension subsequent to a detected entry. In other words, of those individuals that we detect coming between the ports of entry, we want to proportionally increase the amount of arrests that we make along the southwest border. That is one addition.
Third factor?
The third factor would be intelligence in terms of what is happening along our border, both with respect to any potential violence within that corridor, transnational criminal organizations operating in that area, and any associated, to give you a third and a fourth, any associated crimes related to smuggling or other crimes within the border communities that are taking place along the southwest border.
The last time, I don't know if it was Mr. Duncan or somebody had asked you the question about the definition, operational definition, and you were using something different from what we had put in 2006. And part of that definition talks about enforcing the border. That is, the intrusions into the U.S., which means apprehensions. So are you coming up with other factors beyond that definition that we put in statute in 2006?
No, sir, not at all. Matter of fact, I believe Congressman Duncan was referring to the 2006 Fence Act, whereby operational control was defined by the prevention of all illegal activity. I'm just suggesting the manner in which we do that is not inconsistent. It's a little bit more sophisticated in terms of staffing models.
Well, I don't know what you mean by more sophisticated, but give us a benefit of doubt that we'll understand what you mean. Again, apprehensions, and I just want to have a succinct, but I've met with you, I've talked to your staff, we still have no idea what you're talking about, with all due respect. Apprehensions is one, and Mr. Brockter said that's the main measure to look at stopping people from coming into the U.S. What's the other one? Threats?
Well, Congressman, first I'd like to clarify, it wasn't my intent to be either condescending or in using the word sophistication to allude to the fact that this particular committee wouldn't understand it. I was suggesting in terms of how we do our staffing models, we have matured the way that we look at it and look at things just...
Mr. Fisher, let me ask you, why don't you put that in writing and send that to us in a very succinct way? Because this is the second time I've sat down with you and I still don't understand. I've been doing this probably not as long as you, but I think I have a working understanding. Could you provide that to the committee? And if I can just ask one question. The emergency supplemental was signed into law in August 2010. The funds were available immediately. How many Border Patrol agents have you hired under the emergency funding? Because in talking to the Homeland appropriators, they said that you still haven't given them an answer as to how many you've hired. And I understand it takes, 18 months? Where are you exactly in hiring under that emergency process?
Congressman, I'll have to get back specifically for the question.
Whoa. You don't understand how many people you as the chief don't understand how many people you've hired at this time?
No, we have over 20,000 Border Patrol agents right now.
No. How many under the supplemental bill that we passed last August in 2010, you were supposed to hire 1,000 because it was an emergency. How many, the funds were available immediately, how many Border Patrol agents have you hired under the emergency funding?
I don't know specifically under that specific appropriations, but we've hired 100
Mr. Chief Fisher, you're saying that as the chief of the Border Patrol, an emergency bill that got passed in August of 2010, you're telling me that you don't know how many people you've hired under that emergency? It didn't happen last month. It happened in August of 2010.
under the specific appropriations, because those numbers would be different depending upon when we started hiring in October, both in terms of backfilling the attrition positions and onwards to our goal this fiscal year of hiring 21,370. I don't know specifically against the emergency appropriations how much of that total that we've done thus far, but I will be able to follow up and get you that answer, sir.
First question, I still don't understand you. Second question, I still don't understand your question. Madam Chair, I know you've been very diligent, but I would like to ask you to give us that information also as to how many people under the emergency bill that we passed in August of 2010, 1,000 people, and they were supposed to be so the National Guard can come in. The National Guard will be stepping out. Border Patrol is supposed to be coming in. I'm surprised that you don't know how many people you've hired under that, how many have been interviewed, background investigations, how many have been sent to the BPP Academy. I would ask you to please submit that in writing to the committee. Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Fisher. The new CR, HR Resolution 48 that I believe we're going to vote on this afternoon will cut $107 million for construction of Border Patrol facilities. This funds for replacements of existing Border Patrol facilities in 4 states, including Texas, Washington, Maine, and New York. I believe the ones in Texas, or one of them was in Freer. I don't represent that area, but I just passed it just about 2 days ago on Sunday, so I'm very familiar with that station. If there was a need shown to upgrade these facilities, why weren't these projects moved up forward last year? If it was so important, why are we letting go of this money?
Congressman, I will tell you, as we look at all facilities within the Border Patrol and our deployments, we take a look at interior stations, for instance, and we look at deployments if we're going to be increasing staffing or attriting down staffing in different locations. All of that was taken into consideration when we make the recommendations on which Border Patrol stations or facilities. Some cases, if we're going to be doing co-location, it would just make sense to do that as opposed to continuing building, either adding to pre-existing facilities or adding new facilities. And that's all the process that we went into to make our recommendations to the department.
So therefore, and again, I speak of Freer because I'm familiar with that, and I don't know if you would like to work there, but I'm sure the men and women that work there would like to have a better place. And if you're in a small rural area, I think the folks in the small rural area would appreciate a better place. So when did this change from a priority to a non-priority so you can let go of this unobligated $107 million that we're going to be voting on this afternoon to cut?
Well, the specific time on the priority, Congressman, I'll have to get back to you on that. But I do share your interest, and certainly the men and women of the United States Border Patrol require adequate facilities because we're asking them, quite honestly, to protect this country, and we're focused on that as well.
Can you put that in writing and again share it to all committees?
Yes, sir.
Second thing is, let's talk about administrative costs at Border Patrol headquarters. How many agents do you have at headquarters?
Approximately 230.
Okay. Can you afford, without affecting your mission there at headquarters, to move some of those to the border where there's been an emergency declared?
And we have in some instances, Congressman, yes.
Could you put it down in writing? Well, let me ask you this: how many do you think you can afford leaving from headquarters and now allowing to go down to the border? I'd rather have it's like in the state. When I was in the state government, there was always a concern about the superintendent's office having this overhead administrative cost, putting more money for the teachers in the classroom. This is the same type of logic that I'm using. How many folks can you let go from headquarters and send them back to the border where they can provide security at the border?
Yeah, we will provide you that report, sir.
Okay. Do you have any idea right now?
I do not.
Okay. Could you let go of some?
I beg your pardon?
Could you move some to the border?
I don't know at this point.
Okay. As the chief of the Border Patrol, I've asked you several questions today, and you have not been able to answer at least 3 of them.
Well, Congressman, I will tell you specifically when with 230 Border Patrol agents in our headquarters, that was an increase from 34 as we were transitioning the Department of Homeland Security. When I received requests from the field in terms of increased staffing levels, there's a whole host of things that are taken into consideration, and I've got a very competent staff that informs me on their judgment on what the impacts are going to be whenever we've moved any Border Patrol agents. I would expect that will be the process in this case as well.
Okay. Will you specifically let us know if you can move any of your Border Patrol agents or headquarters without affecting your mission there down to the border where I believe they were where they were supposed to have been gone to. Let me ask you this: under the supplemental bill, that you don't have the answer as to how many you've hired so far, is there any intention to have any of those people go up to headquarters?
Not at this point, sir.
Not at this point.
Not to increase our authorized levels at headquarters.
Okay. And again, if you can put that in writing and share it with the subcommittee. This is a general question. According to a recent GAO report, CBP had, I believe it was $639.4 million, Mr. Stana, unobligated balance in its customs user fee account as a result of excess collections from a temporary fee increase and elimination of North America Free Trade Agreement country exceptions from January 1st of 1994 to September 30th, 1997. I think GAO first identified this unused funds in 2008. Bottom line is, we got $639 million. They're in a bank account. Is that correct, Mr. Stana?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay. Gentlemen, if you had $639 million in an account, why have we not moved it? And I can understand probably answers will be, well, are we authorized to use this money or not? If not, has Eddie brought that to our attention? I'm sure that Chairman Miller, myself, could find a lot of ways to use this money to help border, both at the northern or at the southern border. Mr. Kostanek would be happy to get you more UAVs. I'm a big supporter, and I like the job that you're doing. Same thing, Mr. Browarski. I'm just saying, is there a way that we can move this money? Because if you talk to border sheriffs, they'll say, hey, we'll take a share of this. If we talk to Homeland, instead of giving money back, we'd love to take that. What can we do to help you? In other words, to get the $639 million unobligated balance if it's still there.
Congressman Cuellar, we can give you much more detail, but we do have some legislative proposals about how to use those fees. In the past, there have been times where we've been able to move some of that, but it's important to understand that in large measure, those fund some of our officers. We have to project the cost of those officers. We have to project the cash flow, and right now we're looking at a deficit, not a surplus. So we'll give you the detail, but it's in the past, when we've had surpluses that we thought would be continuing surpluses, we have sometimes been able to move those funds to other purposes. Right now, we're very concerned about paying the salaries of our existing officers, and we'll get you some more detail on that.
Yeah, I got to close, but can you just get us and work with Mr. Stanas at their unobligated $639 million, give us some suggestions how we can help you, at least a one-time purchases like equipment. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.